Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are super excited to have you here. My name is Lindsay Mirando. I'm the Director of Marketing for Hello Bar. And I have Chad Gilbert here with me today, who is the Director of Content Management for Neil Patel Digital.
Hi, guys.
We'll wait a few more minutes to let everyone sign on. We're super excited for today's training. We are doing content strategy planning. So for those of you that are excited to learn more about content, maybe a little overwhelmed with planning your content, or just really want to learn the content strategy that we utilize in Neil Patel's side of things. Neil Patel is one of our co-founders of Hello Bar. You're in the right place. So maybe type in the chat box, let us know where you're in from. Hey, Carlos, how's it going?
Hey.
Thanks for joining, Carlos. It's good to see you. It's been a while. Welcome, welcome. Type in the chat, let us know where you're in from, maybe why you joined. We'd love to hear from you. So how this presentation is going to go is Chad is going to be sharing his entire content strategy from A to Z. So that you guys can really be efficient with your content planning. And then from there, we're going to be doing Q&A. Feel free to, yeah, for sure. It's been way too long, Carlos. And feel free to type in the chat as we go along. We're going to answer all the questions in the end, so Chad can make sure to get as much content out there as possible for you guys. But don't worry, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A in the end. This is being recorded, so we will send out a recording. Don't worry. So if you missed something in your note-taking, we've got you completely covered. So let's get started. I want to be mindful of your time. Thank you again for joining. For those of you just hopping on, as I mentioned, my name is Lindsay Mirando. I'm the Director of Marketing for Hello Bar. And we've got Chad Gilbert, who is the Director of Content Management for Neil Patel Digital. And today we're talking content strategy and planning. Chad has a ton of experience when it comes to this. He runs our entire content department over here at Neil Patel Digital, so you can say this guy definitely knows what he's talking about. So I'm super excited to have invited him on here to really share with our community how you guys can plan your content, and not only for your blogs, for your websites, but this can also play into using Hello Bar as well. So really in everything you do. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn this over to Chad. We're going to share a screen. If you can just let me know that you can see our screen okay, and then we will get going. Let's see, type it in the chat. Thank you, thank you. Yep, awesome, Carlos, thank you. Perfect. All right, well, we will just go ahead and get started. And Chad, let me make sure you're all set up. Okay, one more second. All right, Chad, take it away.
All right, thanks for the awesome introduction, Lindsay. Definitely really excited to be here today and put together this presentation, especially for your Hello Bar viewers and for this webinar. So excited to dive into the content strategy and planning process. And in addition to actually kind of giving you examples and walking you through how we can plan content for a specific client or industry or topic, if you will. There's also some helpful hints, pro tips, and as well as some helpful links along the way that you will also have access to after this presentation. So without further ado, today we'll be covering a lot, the agenda here. So we're going to define content goals, and then we're going to speak about content audience as well as an audit and an analysis. Then get into the planning, which is an including of the content calendar as well as content promotion. So according to HubSpot, companies that publish 16 plus blog posts per month get almost 3.5 times more traffic than competitors or than companies that publish between 0 to 4 monthly posts. So just wanted to kind of put this out there, attention grabbing quote, if you will. Now, it's not just the amount of content that you're posting, it's the type and the quality of the content that you are posting, and is it resonating with the right audience that you're trying to reach? So we will go through and I can help you out to give you some tips on how to create content to get up to that 16 posts per month. So first we need to define the content goals. So, content goals can stem from business goals. So whether or not you have an e-commerce site or you are just starting your own blog, you definitely should have some set goals in mind that you want to achieve with that blog or e-commerce sales and whatnot. So sales goals are good, but they should not only be tied to content, because as a lot of us know, content is more upper funnel strategy for the most part. So while we're able to use content to get people into the funnel, if we're doing a purchase funnel, if you will, it shouldn't only be tied to sales goals. So content should have its own goals. So for example, we like to follow the SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based goals for content, very similar to any type of business goals that you may have learned about in school or are using currently. But here's an example. We want to increase traffic by a certain percent by becoming a go-to online source for all things Medicare supplement insurance within 12 months of campaign launch. And just to give a quick caveat here, the example that I'm going to be using is this Medicare supplement example, if we were a Medicare client, if you will. So using one example because it's going to help detail out the process as we go. The next step, or most important thing that I think is most important from a content strategy standpoint, is what kind of content do you need and want on your blogs, so or on your website. Is that blogs? Is it in-depth articles? Is it infographics, videos? Is it a mixture of all of those? Also think of the types of content and what that content will be doing. So is it going to be education? Is it going to educate the readers? Is it going to entertain them? Is it newsworthy, or is it going to inspire them? Think of these things as well when you're going through these content goals. And also, what's your budget for content? We'll get into that a little later of what I mean by that. You can create content with very little budget, and you can, if you have budget to implement content and take your strategy to the next level, I will give you some tips and tricks about that later on in the presentation. So after we have a few goals in mind from what you want your content to achieve, the next most important thing is defining your content audience. So research and create a few different types of audience personas, if you will, for your content. Now this might seem like a little much and getting into the weeds, but if you have a target audience in mind, and if we're using the Medicare example, for instance, working professional men and women who are 50 to 65 years old, meaning they're within that sweet spot of about to retire and would be interested in learning information about Medicare supplemental insurance that they could potentially use. So here's a quick snapshot that I created of a content audience persona for this particular example. So Jennifer is 63 years old. She's a senior manager at a global communications corporations. She's relatively new to the online research and shopping, etc., but she does know her way around the internet, and she's starting to utilize it more in her everyday life. This is pretty much across the board in a lot of different industries with this age group right now. So big opportunity there. She's been working with her company for 30 years and is about 2 years away from retiring. She's financially stable enough to retire early, but she doesn't want to pay the higher monthly fee for her Medicare or medical insurance, and because Medicare won't kick in until her 65th birthday. So she's been putting money aside in anticipation for getting a supplemental Medicare insurance plan to maintain the level of care that she's received for the past 30 years at her company. But she's not aware of all the different options and coverages that are available to her. So this is a good deep dive example of one specific persona under our working professional men and women 50 to 65 years old target audience. So you'll see that after you kind of go through this process, and this can take anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how much research you want to do and how much thinking you want to do about what your content is going to be doing. But this already is giving us a lot of information to where she is in her life and the information that she would start to search online for Medicare specifically. Now, taking it a step further, once you've identified a target audience and maybe some personas, think of ways that content could answer some of the audience's questions, concerns, and anything else. So And taking it a step further, how will your content drive audiences to take action and to make an act to ultimately do what you want them to do? So in this example, Jennifer is starting her search for Medicare supplemental insurance in Google, Medicare supplement plans coverage. She wants to know what type of coverages there are and what the differences are, because like we said, there's a lot of people out there in her age group that might not know all of the differences and nuances and coverages that come with these Medicare supplemental insurance plans. So once we have a good idea of what our content goals are and some audiences and target audiences that we want to reach with our content, we can then start auditing our current content that we have on our website or our blog. And we start by taking just a content inventory of all of our landing pages, blog pages, any resources you may have, in-depth articles, frequently asked question pages, all of the URLs that you have on your site currently, and literally dropping them into an Excel list and starting to highlight the titles and understanding exactly what that content is and what it's doing. So things to note, some helpful tips to note during this audit process is the navigation title. So the name of the main navigation link of the landing page or the blog, what the page name is and what's displayed there, and the URL. So all that information you can start gathering to see exactly what this page is doing. Add some notes in this Excel if you need to maybe detail out why one page might be a little different than another if there's similar URL or page structures. And then putting it into a content hierarchy, some way of showing the basic relationship of how all of these pages on your site or blog are related to each other. This process can be pretty laborious if you have a lot of pages. So definitely take some time to dive in and figure out what's there right now. Once you have a good list of this content, you can start to analyze what it's doing. So does some of this content already answer specific questions that you may have come up with during your content goals section or your audience analysis? Does it bubble up into any of your overall content goals? You can also look at the performance metrics from Google Analytics or any other analytics software that you prefer to see if any of the content URLs that you have are garnering traffic, what's happening on the page, how long are people on it, is there a big or a large bounce rate? Taking all that information into consideration to actually see how this content is performing. And then once you have this all kind of detailed out, you can start to get an idea of what content you want to get rid of or hide from the website, what content you may need to refresh or combine. As I mentioned, there could be some similarities across landing pages of content. And while they could be two separate pieces, they could be trying to get the same goal or same action from that audience. So maybe combining them and making them a larger piece of content that is still doing the same thing and has that same goal in mind. And then finally, the most important part of this analysis is really taking a pulse on what content you want to add or need to add. So pro tip here for new content that you might need to add. A great free resource for content inspiration is Answer the Public. And this tool crawls with SERPs and a few different forums online for specific questions that are being asked and searched around keywords or topics. So keeping in line with our Medicare supplemental insurance example, this is a nice visual graph that Answer the Public actually gives to us. And you can see there are a ton of questions, starting with are, will, where, which, who, why, what, and then there's a ton more that complete that circle, but I've cut it off here just for the example. This is also exportable from Answer the Public into an Excel document, so you can get all of these queries that are being asked. So 3 of them that kind of pop out to me here are which Medicare supplement is best, and Medicare supplement versus Medicare Advantage. What are the pros and cons? Are all Medicare supplemental plans the same? So there are a lot of interesting questions that are coming up that I'm already drawing, connecting the dots to from an audience perspective to questions that they're asking and questions that audience members within that target audience could be asking that we could definitely be a voice, an authoritative voice in from an insurance standpoint.
Hey, Chad, I have 2 questions for you that I want to clarify. So when you put this into Answer the Public, basically you get like what people are searching for in Google?
Yeah, Google and on forums as well. So it's not clear on all of the different platforms that they pull from, but definitely coming from Google and other search engines and online forums where there's question-based asking.
Oh, that's amazing. So I know I always tell people, and you put it in the beginning, when you're thinking about your ideal client, think about, okay, well, what would they Google, right? And then people usually draw a blank. They're like, I don't know what my ideal client would Google. So this is an amazing resource to be able to do that. Second question, some people might not know what SERPs are. Can you just clarify?
Yeah, SERPs, sorry, using jargon. So it's actually search engine results pages. So when you search something on Google, you'll get a long, 1,000 list of pages that have a bunch of different listings on it. So those pages are called search engine result pages. And the short term for it we call here in the industry is SERPs. So
awesome.
Yeah,
that's great. So
great
this gives
question.
a ton of content that you could go after.
Yeah, and you can type in, you can actually go on and play with Answer the Public whenever you want and type in a bunch of different keywords that might be relevant to your website or your blog and just get an idea of what's going on right now. So this, like I mentioned, was an example of just typing in Medicare supplement, and all of these questions came about. If you look on Answer the Public, there's a lot of different knowledge or information graphs that pop up too with different variations of these questions as well to help you get an idea.
Awesome. Great.
So once you have, the content goals and your audience, again, with after the inventory, we can now start to also analyze what's going on from a competitive standpoint. So whether you're an e-commerce site or you're just a lifestyle blog or a hiking blog, there's competition in any industry online right now. And some of the industries are more saturated than others, but the competitor analysis portion of the content strategy and planning process is arguably one of the most important parts. This is where you get to dig into the competition from a qualitative and quantitative perspective using a lot of different tools, which I have some great resources here on the page for you. But mainly you're asking, where does your audience go to get the content and information currently? So for our Medicare example, we have a couple of bullet points here. Healthcare publications, large and small, they may be searching or subscribing to online and offline. AARP is a large publication, obviously, within the retirement audience. That has a lot of helpful information and content that's constantly being published there to get some great inspiration and ideas from. Social media is a big one right now, especially in this particular audience group. They go there for word of mouth recommendations from friends, especially on Facebook. My mom, who is in this audience group particularly, she actually is using Facebook more than ever to get information and using it as a search engine as well. So definitely utilizing different platforms to get information and to start collecting and gathering what's going on from a competitor standpoint. So some other great resources we have here. BuzzSumo, there is a free basic version as well as they have a couple different tiered paid versions, but the free basic version gives a lot of helpful information right now. So it's great for finding content that is performing well on social media, and it actually breaks down. If you were to type in a specific keyword, it'll break down and find articles that are ranking for that key term, as well as how those articles or publications or pieces of content are performing on social. So this will give you an idea of, how engaging that content is. So the more engaging a piece of content is, I would say take that and, research and analyze that piece of content for maybe why it's engaging, how they break up the article or the infographic, what types of content are in there, and start gathering that information for yourself. Another great tool is Google Keyword Planner, and this is great for researching keyword ideas. As Lindsay mentioned, some of you might not know what your audience is searching on Google, but from, if you have a couple of keywords that are important to you, to your e-commerce site or to your blog, you can have those handy and type them into Keyword Planner, and they'll actually give you variations and other keywords within that industry that are being searched with some relative ballpark search volume around those keywords. So how popular are those keywords and how many times people are searching them on a monthly basis. Then there are some paid tools that get a little more granular with some keyword analysis and helps with some strategic inspiration from keyword and SEO data. So SEMrush and SpyFu are two that I have used before. Both of them used to have some free testing platform. I'm not exactly sure if they are right now, but again, great options here for some paid as well. Ahrefs is another tool to see how competitor pieces are doing from a backlink perspective. So with BuzzSumo, how it's showing us kind of the social engagement and the social perspective and the links that are happening on social, Ahrefs gives us a really good example and insight into pieces of content that are performing well, and then actually getting backlinks and references and mentions from other publications, other platforms, and other online authoritative figures, if you will. And another free tool, number 5, is setting up an RSS feed or some Google alerts within your industry around specific keywords or maybe even specific competitors. It's a great way to keep your finger on the content pulse in your industry, as well as what the competitor is doing on a real-time basis. So I set up RSS feeds for if I had an insurance company as a client, I would set up RSS feeds on their top 5 competitors to see what's going on their blog and what kind of content they're publishing and on what cadence. So I can get a pulse of what's going on there and potentially why they're outranking for specific key terms, because they may be posting 5 blogs a week on one specific key term. So it's a way for you to start strategizing where you want to go and how you want to start creating content if there are specific areas that you want to start to rank for. So a pro tip for competitor analysis when you're kind of looking through all these tools and getting a lot of data, while doing this analysis and research, start keeping a list of content links that you like or that inspires you. So save those URLs or the high level topic, and then maybe put some information on the structure of that piece of content or the topic that you found interesting or inspiring. Anything that will help you during the content planning process, which is the next phase of this, is going to be very helpful. So snapshots here on the left is just a Google search result for typing in Medicare supplemental insurance. You can see all of the top 10 pieces of content and publications and websites that are ranking for that term right now. And you can start diving into each one of those to start seeing maybe why they're ranking, what competitor it is, and starting to understand the structure and layout of the content. The screenshot to the right is a screenshot from BuzzSumo, the platform I was mentioning on the last slide. And again, typing simply Medicare insurance and Medicare supplemental insurance, we can see what's happening with some of these blogs within and pieces of publication within the last year, and how socially engaged they were on Facebook, Twitter, and all the major social media channels. And you can start diving in there to get an idea of why those are performing well from those competitors. So the next stage we go into is actually the content planning process. This is where we start to organize all of those ideas that you may have started collecting during the analysis process, and we start to organize them under some main types and focuses. So now, there are a lot of publications and a lot of resources out there for content strategy and planning. These are 3 basic and pretty important areas that we can start to think of content. So I have them here for you guys, but this gets deeper and actually can go a lot deeper with the types of content and the different types of goals that we want to achieve with our content. But this is keeping it pretty simple and also easy to implement. So main types. Basically what you want to do is you want to have categories, or think of categories that you want your website or your blog to start becoming a voice in. So with this Medicare insurance, supplemental insurance example, I have 5 examples of main categories that I would want to start creating content in. So I have Medicare Supplemental Insurance 101, so obviously some high-level basic information around the coverage, around the types of plans, and some information there. Medicare news, obviously healthcare industry is booming with news and news stories every day, every week. So definitely a good piece of, or a good category for us to cover from a Medicare standpoint, because we can repurpose content and we can start utilizing what's happening in the industry and creating a voice for ourselves on our own site or blog. Retirement 101 is another biggie that came to mind. As I mentioned, a lot of people within the specific audience group of 50 to 65 are starting to use search engines and online information a lot more than ever before, and searching a lot more than ever before. So creating content around retirement planning, checklist of the top things to think about before retiring that someone who's going to retire might need to know. Any information there that we can provide someone searching for that would be awesome for us to cover on our site. Another category here is comparing Medicare supplemental plans. So diving deeper from that 101 section, this will actually get into a comparison of the different types of plans. There are many different types of plans that have different letters and variations depending on the person's coverages and what they want and what they need. So all of that is information that we can start to become an authoritative voice in and start to create content around. And finally, for another category here, life after work. So more so than just planning for retirement, what happens after retirement? I know my mom, who is getting ready to retire herself, has already brought up a lot of questions to me about, how she's going to stay busy, what she's going to do. And so there's a lot of lifestyle and entertaining and inspiring content that we can create here for users who would be interested in Medicare supplemental insurance plans and information. But also this is another step further along that process of giving them information that they can potentially use within that content audience. So with that, there are 4 key goals for creating content online and creating content in general. We need to either educate, inform, entertain, or inspire. So thinking of those 4 main goals of the content, you can start to see how pieces of content can start to fit under these main categories. And additionally, what types of content are we going to be creating to educate, inform, entertain, and inspire? There's blogs, landing page copy, ebooks, guides, infographics, videos, and again, there's hundreds of different types and variations of content, but blogging and written content is probably the first and foremost that we can get, and it's usually the easiest to plug and play. So once you start to think of all of this, you can start to categorize and get your information organized in an Excel sheet. So you'll see here I have the main types of categories and few of them listed out there, and then some topics, and then the tone or the goal of that piece of content, and then the type of content that I would like to create for that specific topic, and then a little summary. So all of this is basically information that we've gathered along the way from the audience analysis and the competitor analysis with information that you've collected. We can start to form it and finesse it into exactly what we want to do from a content perspective. So once you have a long list of content ideas and categories that you want to hit for your site or e-commerce website, you will then go into the calendar or the scheduling phase. But before that, we need to understand exactly how much content you can create. So you may have 100 different ideas that'll flow into 5 different main categories. But if you are one person and you're going to be handling all the written content yourself, you have to really think about, how many pieces of content am I going to be able to create realistically on a monthly basis? So once you have an idea of that, you can then say, all right, I can handle 2 long form blog posts a month at about 1,000 words given my bandwidth right now. So with that, you'll say, okay, for the year, that's about 24 pieces of content. And then you can start selecting and prioritizing from that Excel list that you've created of where you want to create content and specifically when you want to create that. There could be some seasonality factors there. From the Medicare insurance example, open enrollment, I believe, is October through December or January. So that time frame is really important. Ramping up to that is important. So we can think about ways to strategize the types of content that we're creating around that time. This is where that budget question comes in as well. If you are creating content yourself, but you have a little budget to invest in your blog or your website, think about what that number is. And there are a lot of great resources out there, such as ProBlogger, where you can find really good freelance writers, put an ad up, and basically detail out exactly what you're looking for, and maybe come to an agreement on their rates and what they would write. And then of course you can have them do a lot of that brunt work of getting that piece created. And then so all you have to really focus on is, editing it and making it exactly what you want. So that's where the budget question comes in, because if you're able to put some budget behind this, you are now able to increase the amount of content that you're creating. So if you were only able to do 2 yourself, maybe you have budget for 2 more that a ghostwriter could do, or a freelance writer could do and help you with. So now you're at 4 pieces of content a month. Once you have the amount of content that you're going to be creating, like I mentioned, and any seasonality factors for your industry or your blog that you're writing, you can then build out a calendar very similar to this. So you can put what days you want to publish on. If you have the bandwidth to do about 8 posts a month, I would suggest evening it out to 2 posts a week, spreading it out here on Tuesday and Thursday, and then also get an idea of when you need those pieces of content finished or delivered to you by, if you're having someone actually draft them for you. So just getting that organized and having it all out there in a visual manner really helps from a planning aspect. It really takes it to the next level from all of your ideas that you've been planning and looking at and wanting to cover, and then it gets it into this visual plan, which is really nice and organized, and it keeps you to a schedule. You'll notice here that I also have on Wednesdays and Fridays, for this particular example, we want to syndicate or post that on our social media channels. As well as potentially maybe put some spend behind that on Facebook and Twitter and boosting those, or doing a little paid on social. It's another area where the budget comes in mind, but it's an area where you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. It could literally be what you have. If it's $30, $50 for a day, whatever it may be, and target your audience specifically that you would want. So getting more into that. Content and creating it is really half the battle. The second portion of this, equally important, is the promotion of it. So as I mentioned, pushing it out on social media to an audience that you already have, or your email list is another great example of pushing out new content to on a regular basis. Content is only successful when it's discoverable on search engines, when people read it, engage with it, share it, link to it, you get the picture. So you must think of a promotion plan for the content that you're creating, especially when you spend so much time and potentially money into creating this content. So just some bullet points, high-level examples: social media ads, as I mentioned, to target specific audiences. And if you go through this process from start to finish, you already have a detailed audience persona, a few of them potentially, that you can go after on social media to make sure that your content gets in front of the right people. You can contact industry influencers via social media and share that specific content that you created with them. Give them a heads up. Hey, I noticed that you're covering Medicare, in this aspect. Check out this great guide that we just created on our site. Your followers would probably really enjoy reading it and get a lot of information out of it. Hitting them up on Twitter just like that is a great way, and it's free, it's organic. Another way you can do this is contacting other bloggers in your industry to see if there's interest in cross-linking to each other's content and or referencing it or creating an actual guest blog opportunity on the other publication. This can be done via social media, where you're reaching out via Twitter or messaging in Facebook, or some blogs and publications actually have the editors or the blog owners' contact information on a contact page, so you can easily find it and create them a specific pitch, if you will, to get to work with them. Organic social media to garner that engagement and conversation around content is another great way, and free. If you have a social media following, make sure you're putting that information out there and repurposing some of that content, asking questions so it garners some engagement and some answers and conversations on those pieces. Google came out with its most recent algorithm that social media engagement and conversations and what's going on those posts is really the most important factor and leads to higher ranking for specific search terms and for specific pieces of content. So it's not only about getting a like anymore, it's about what's happening with that content on those social channels. And then I also have your email list, your marketing list. You can have a good list there of people that are already opted in to receive information from you. So once you start having a steady flow of fresh, new, engaging, relevant content, we can easily start to send that out to them on your email list.
I think that's such a good point too, because for those of you that do know Neil and neilpatel.com and you're on his email list, that's what he does every week. He sends out at least 2 to 3 emails with content. So he's just generating content based on questions that his community is asking, based on what he's currently looking to rank for, all multiple different aspects to it, but that's what he's sending out. It's a quick, short email, and then it's like, hey, check out this newest video I made for your blog post. So I love the email list and the social media.
Yeah, exactly. And another great tool to implement if you have a blog that is now posting regular content, you can set up an RSS email feed that can literally send the new posts that you have coming out and formulate them in a way that just sends directly to the person's email on a set time every day if you have a set publishing schedule. So they're constantly getting the information when it's available to them or when it's posted.
And you do that through your blog?
Yeah, you can do that through your blog and an email marketing platform that you may be using.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. And I'm curious, so one thing that I think comes up a lot is that a lot of us are probably always in idea phase, right? We've got tons of like brainstorming ideas, tons of content ideas, and sometimes you can get lost in that and not get to the implementation. Do you brainstorm once a month and then plan out the content? How often are you planning out content? Like, what does the schedule look like?
Yeah, so we have set, at Neil Patel Digital, we have set times on a weekly basis that we're brainstorming for different clients in different industries, just to keep our, like I said, keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on. And then from there, we just start collecting ideas, and it's more on a monthly to a quarterly basis that we're trying to plan content out. So we have a good, and hopefully at some, it's best to get a year idea of at least a skeleton example of the areas that you want to start hitting. You don't need to have everything detailed out for the year, but if you know the main categories of your blog or website that you want to start creating content for, you can definitely set focuses, for this 3 months, we're going to focus on these 4 categories and get 2 posts for each category. So if you have an idea or a skeleton like that, then you can easily start plugging and implementing the ideas that you come up with on that weekly basis. So that's how we kind of run it here. But brainstorming for me kind of happens all the time. I'm searching online. I'm constantly looking at SERPs and looking on different industry publications and going into BuzzSumo just to see what's going on there. And I'm constantly collecting ideas, and my brain's always storming, if you will. So it just depends on how you like to work. But I would say having a skeleton idea of what you want to create and with a time frame is the best approach, and then you can start getting detailed as you get closer to those dates.
Yeah, and another thing that I used to do in my business was we would take all the questions that people would ask us on social media. We did sales calls, so we would take the questions from that. We would write down any questions that we constantly got, put them in an Excel sheet, because that was great content too. If they're asking it, other people are asking. If you can see consistencies around the same questions, then you can start to write articles around that too.
100%. And frequently asked question pages and content is another great way that you can use those questions that are coming in, create a page for that, and potentially start ranking for those questions.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So that is what I have so far for you guys. So now we can open it up to questions. Again, this was a lot of information. We will be sending this out to all of you on here, and there's a lot of great resources in the notes and some links to specific tools and platforms that I've mentioned that you guys can utilize and start implementing on your own.
Great. And I'll also make sure to send this slide deck out because you have so many great resources in the recap. But I would love to open up to Q&A. You guys, any questions around content, let's fire away. You can type in the chat. You can type in the Q&A, wherever you'd like to chat or wherever you'd like to ask. Let's get started because I love this is a great opportunity. Like I said, Chad runs our entire content team over here. He's working hand in hand with Neil and everyone. So it's time to pick his brain and ask questions. I'll let you guys fire away on the chat. I know my first question is thinking, you know, we have a team here at Neil Patel Digital, and not everyone may have a team, right? So if you could give like 1 or 2 top tips starting place, like where would you tell people to start? Like how much content would you tell them to start producing? You know, just thinking about like a little bit of a like starting place for them where they could start taking action today, knowing that they may not have like a full team behind them.
Yeah, great question. So, you know, with the quote that I had included in the beginning, it said, you know, companies, large companies that are producing 16 plus blog posts a month get 3.5 times more traffic to those posts and that to their website. That is obviously a lot of content, and those are companies that have a team behind them. So to start, if you aren't creating any content, any new content at all from a blog standpoint, I would say shoot for 1 a month. You know, have that be your goal, and maybe just start ideating what you would want to create for your very first blog post, and then put that as a date that you want to get that live on your site, and give yourself enough time, of course, and then start to ideate and start to build out this process for that very specific post. And then once you get that first one up, if you think it was easy, you got it down, go forward to the next month and let's do like 1 more post. Once you get into the swing of it and you're able to start creating more, I would say up it to as much as you can, but starting with 1 is probably the best approach that I would say.
Love. And one thing I would give as a tip for those of you that can't write, or you may not have like a huge budget to outsource. My business partner did this in the past where she would just literally do a voice memo, or just write out our thoughts. And we hired someone, I think it was on Upwork or Pro Blogger, to just literally combine it and finish it. It was like $50. You know, so you can find people very fairly priced to help you kind of finish your thoughts, or things like that if it's something that comes down to you're not sure what to say.
Yeah, great point. So if you're not the best writer, or it's not your strongest suit, but you do know exactly what you want on your site and created, as Lindsay mentioned, there are some resources out there that you can access and get in contact with some freelance writers that have a really good rate, really good writing experience, and you can actually use them as a ghostwriter for your specific needs. So that's another great point.
Awesome. Okay, we've got, what do you do with boring topics? Are there boring topics at all? I love that question because I have that question too.
Well, just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I think boring is in the eye of the beholder as well. So while we may think, and you know, Medicare insurance might seem kind of chunky and boring, and that's kind of why I use it as an example. It's not the most exciting topic. It's not the most exciting for me. It's not anything that I would be searching for. So if I came across a blog about that, I would say it was boring. However, the content that might be boring to me is probably very useful to someone else. So thinking of boring topics, if you think it's boring, try to really hit where that content is going to go and what it's going to do for that particular audience. So it goes back to the audience and really understanding what their needs are, you know, and maybe what questions are being asked. And if there's a question that's being asked that your boring topic is answering, I would say if you think it's boring, it's definitely useful, and there's search intent behind that, and people are looking for that information. So just because a topic may be boring, I would say let's not scratch it. I would say let's try to dig a little deeper and find out how to make that content actionable to a specific audience.
I love that point because it's so true. I don't know about you guys, but how often do you type in something that you're just like, God, is anyone else typing this? Or, you know, like I just got a new puppy dog and literally everything I'm typing is around like, how do I crate train him? How do I do this? Like topics that most people would not want to read about. But thank goodness for those informative articles, because like when you find consistency in them, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness for this writer. So you're totally right. Or even when, you know, going through insurance enrollment periods, stuff like that. It's just those questions are out there. So although to us they may seem a little more boring, they're super informative and needed.
Yeah.
So great question. Okay, our next question is content promotion. How do you pick the best way to promote your blog beyond social media promotion and blast marketing to get maximum traffic?
Good question. So it's a case by case. Every industry is different. You know, as I mentioned, for the medical insurance and Medicare specifically, a lot of users are within that audience group are going to Facebook more so than ever, and it's exponentially increasing. So I would say definitely hitting there because it's hitting that specific audience, but then also maybe putting a little bit of spend for Facebook advertisement. So if you create a guide for, the top tips for retiring early, and has information about Medicare supplemental insurance in it, you can actually use that blog post and create a specific ad on Facebook. And again, put as little or as much money and as little time frame and as much time frame as you want behind it to that specific audience. You can target it by their age, their demographic, the interests that they have. Facebook has all of that information at your fingertips that you're able to get a little bit of ad spend behind after, of course, you've done what you've mentioned here, promoting it on your social channels as well as your email marketing channels. Another common misconception for content is once you post it once, you can't ever post it again. That's not true. As we know, people are online and people are on social media at different times of the day, 24 hours a day, some in the morning, some at night, all over the place. The strategy behind, if you're going to use one piece of content and promote it a few different times on social media or to your email marketing list, is the messaging that you take out and you actually have around that post. So obviously the ultimate goal is getting the person to go to that post from wherever you're posting it. But you can take out unique pieces of content or data from that blog post and repurpose it for social and share it a few times. There's no shame in that. So definitely a common misconception. So that's another option, is hitting it on social a few times, maybe even hitting it on your email marketing list in different ways a few times as well. As I mentioned, you can use industry, when you're doing your competitor analysis, you'll see a lot of different competitors and publications that are hitting content within your industry or your specific niche. I would definitely start to take note of who that webmaster or editor is, and if there's any contact information there, jot it down. And it's an easy way to just reach out to them, like I mentioned, and organically share your blog post with them, offering it up as a resource, but also giving them some context around why you're sharing it with them. Hit the audience aspect. I see that you're writing a lot of content around Medicare supplemental insurance. My site is covering X, Y, and Z on that topic. Here's a great guide that I think your readers will also really be interested in. If you're offering that type of content to a web publisher, and I'm not talking about reaching out to AARP. However, if you do and you land that, that's amazing. But there are a lot of blogs out there that, have a medium amount of followers, if you will, in the industry, or what I like to call the meaty middle, that are more than willing and open to receiving these types of organic outreach tactics, because they're constantly, just like you guys and all of us here at Neil Patel for our clients, they're looking for fresh, relevant content to resonate with their readers as well. So if you're able to provide that to them, it's a win-win situation.
I think those are such amazing points, and really reframing how you're thinking about the blog content, right? So a lot of times we think about, well, I want to post it out everywhere and just get like as many people coming to it. That's great. That's definitely important.
Yes.
But what is Google like? What is the most important thing about your blog is consistency, frequency, continuing to post relevant content that readers are going to be engaged with.
Yep.
So I look at your website and your blog as your home, right? So when when people are coming to your home, you want to make sure it's clean, it represents you, it looks good. Same with your blog. So it actually serves in a lot of different ways too, beyond getting people there. When you're going out and maybe you want to speak places, or you want to guest blog, or you want to do partnerships, and you send them to your blog to show them the type of content that you're producing. That speaks to who you are. Like you're saying, you can send these blogs out for years and years at a time on social media and put into your content calendar, just, if the most popular ones. You could also take it and make it a guide, right? You could make it your free lead magnet for your opt-in offer on HelloBar. So there's so many different things that you can do with these blogs, but what's key is being consistent over time and putting relevant content out there. So just really thinking about how you frame the blog post, and you never know, like Chad's saying, you could reach out to someone and they may not have an article on that. They're like, wow, this would be really beneficial to our community. The key with reach out is saying, how can I provide value to this person's community that they cannot provide, right? Like I worked with someone in the past that was a health coach. She could do a bunch of testing for sensitivities to foods, gut health, all these different things. She reached out to a bunch of food bloggers who didn't have that background, and said, hey, let's work together. I can provide this value for your community and this education that they can't provide because they didn't have that education, right? Complementary partnership, complementary industries, not conflicting at all. So
100%.
starting to think about stuff like that. Okay, I know we have a ton more questions, so I want to make sure we get to them all. Carlos. Okay, Chad, how much do you think it would cost getting a decent writer for a solo entrepreneur to get a couple really high quality articles published per month, 2K plus words, all research, ideation, and outlines created and given to the writer, if you want to do it on the cheap, if that exists at all? Great question, Carlos.
Well, yeah, definitely a great question. And you already answered a couple of my follow-up questions there. Is if you're providing some good research and outline, content brief, if you will, to these writers, that is already taking a lot of the work and the load right off of their plate, so that all they have to really focus on is pulling that information together, potentially doing a little more research on their own, and then actually focusing on getting that quality content to you. From a cost standpoint, cheap obviously being a pretty relative term, I've seen quality writers come in from ProBlogger, as well as, you know, my 6+ years in the content marketing industry of writers that I've worked with. The cost being as low as around 8 cents per word to, you know, up to 20 cents and higher per word, depending on their depending on what they've written about and, you know, the authoritativeness that they have with their writing. If they're a professional writer versus just a freelance writer who is taking up content work because they have a knack for writing and they like to do it, those are the ones who you can usually get for a cheaper amount versus the more professional writers. So I would say, you know, for a blog post that's 1,000 to 2,500 words, which is the sweet spot that we're kind of hitting for our clients at Neil Patel Digital right now, it's not uncommon to see a quality blog post at that length come in at around $150 to $200. However, as I mentioned, if you find a good writer who is potentially not writing for a long period of time and isn't a professional writer by trade, but is a really good writer, has a lot of writing samples that you can actually ask for to kind of review up front if you go through ProBlogger, you can get a writer that can do $1,000 or 1,000 to 2,500 word piece for 100 or maybe even under it. I've worked with a couple of really good freelancers who have done 1,000 word pieces for 80 to 100 bucks. So, you know, it just depends. And I think that is kind of the research phase of coming up and putting an ad out on ProBlogger, having an idea of how much you want to spend or how much you can spend, using that as your baseline, and obviously not giving that information up front, but having the writer come to you and let you know what their rates are, and then potentially negotiating and kind of working out a deal. It's all case by case if you're dealing with a person who is maybe running their own business or own writing, and they're their own freelancer. So they're handling all these things on a case by case basis as well.
So I think that brings up a really good question. You know, Carlos, I'm really glad you asked that. I'm curious, Chad, when you're vetting these blog writers, beyond like, show me your content, make sure they, you know, got the grammar, the knowledge base, all that stuff. Is there anything else you should be vetting for? Should you ask if they know SEO, if they've written for SEO? Like, what are some key qualifying questions that are just like non-negotiable if someone's going to write your blog? Because we want to make sure if we're staying, you know, trying to be budget friendly, that we're still getting some quality. So, you know, getting a younger writer, stuff like that totally makes sense. Is there anything else we want to like pre-qualify to ensure that we're getting the right person?
Great question. And that actually kind of gets in a little deeper down the funnel of content strategy and planning and bringing in the SEO factor, the search engine optimization factor. So, you know, at Neil Patel Digital, we obviously have a long list of checklist, if you will, that we are vetting writers by. So they have to have had SEO writing experience, meaning they know how to use specific keywords in content within a natural, relevant way. We're not keyword stuffing these articles. They are actual articles that have been ideated and created and strategized around for specific needs that an audience, that someone in that audience needs. But then we need to make sure that we're getting that SEO value in there as well. So do they know how to write meta descriptions? Do they understand what the meta page title is, as well as getting the keyword density to around using the keyword that you want to rank for, specifically if it was Medicare supplemental insurance, using that about 1 per 100 words within that post. So if it's 1,000 words, hitting that word or keyword within the content naturally 10 times would be like the best approach there. Again, all of this information is online. We actually do have a relatively simple checklist for SEO that we could potentially provide as well, just to give you some ideas of what we're looking for, as well as some information that you can provide to the writer that you're vetting for. First and foremost, though, making sure that the writer, if you're going to be outsourcing, such as Carlos asked, making sure that that writer is going to be in the style, voice, and tone that you want on your site, because that's most important. And then is the SEO portion of that, which is equally important. But if they're not getting your style, tone, and feeling down that you want portrayed on your blog or website, it's going to miss the mark no matter what, because you're not going to be happy with it. So when you're reviewing samples and giving information or putting up an ad for a freelancer or talking to a freelancer that you may have met through someone else, really providing as much information as you can up front is going to make the process that much easier and potentially that much more affordable for you because of all the information that you're giving up front.
Love it. Love it. Okay. We've got another question right here. What are other resources you can give us, like Answer the Public? What are other websites or resources out there to help find content or create relevant content from DJ?
Yeah, great question, DJ. So as Lindsay and I mentioned, we are going to be sending this deck out, and I forget which slide number it is, but there's 5 resources there, and I think like 3 of them are free. So the BuzzSumo, Answer the Public, Google Keyword Planner, I believe is still free to go in and just search around for keywords and such. But another great source that we all know of is Google. If you have an idea of some keywords in your industry that your blog or your website is ranking for and converting for, searching those keywords on Google, seeing what the first page has to offer, and really diving into that content. If there's articles there, in-depth, videos, infographics, anything that's ranking there, really, just take those URLs into an Excel spreadsheet and start researching those articles specifically and take notes to understand how they're formatting their content, how many words are in that piece of content. You'll notice that a lot of Google page 1 has almost 1,000 and above, depending on the content as well as the authoritativeness of the site. So, CNN versus Joe Schmo's news blog in Oregon, obviously CNN is going to rank because of their authoritativeness in Google and their domain. However, Joe Schmo's blog, news blog in Oregon can cover that same topic, but hit more points, get it longer than that CNN article, start to promote it and start to drive links and social shares and engagement to it. And over time, there could be a chance that that small publication out of Oregon could rank for that specific news term.
That makes sense. Sorry, guys, we're okay. Over here, we work downtown, and sometimes you get the ambulances and the fire trucks. Okay, we have one more question. How do you go about documenting your style and tone?
Great question. And another thing that we'll probably add into this slide deck that will be sent out is some information around asking yourself from like a business owner perspective, what you want your brand to be. How would your brand sound if it went to a party? Now, I know it sounds silly to think of your brand or your company or your blog as someone going to a party, but when you think about it that way and you put yourself in that position, you're really able to start getting some really good descriptive words for your business or your blog that you can start to jot down in an organized fashion or to start creating a content voice, style, tone guide for whichever writer you're going to be sourcing. So I'll be able to provide those and some really interesting questions that you can ask yourself as a business owner to help get that style, tone, and voice down if you don't have an idea at first. But also thinking of, what industry you're in. So from the Medicare example, we're going to need to be informative. We're going to need to be authoritative, and we're going to need to be educational. We're not going to really be comedic or funny. or lighthearted about these subjects. It's going to be straight to the point, answering questions and providing information. So thinking of it that way. So if you're a lifestyle blogger and you have a following and you have you cook on an everyday basis and that's what you're blogging about is your cooking, your personality and your experience really is going to need to be interjected into that content. So that's where you can be more fun and uplifting and inspirational and maybe a little funny, and your personality can come out in the content there. So those are, two pretty extreme differences that I wanted to put side by side, but we'll include some questions that'll help you guys get started on that voice, style, and tone question.
I love it. And yeah, I think it's like, how do you want to be portrayed? How do you want to come across in the industry, right? Like you look at Dollar Shave Club and Gillette did it pretty boring. And then Dollar Shave Club came in and was like the bear in the woods video that went completely viral. And suddenly it's like, it's fun to buy razors, right? So really you have to think about your brand and how you want to come across. And then also I was going to say, we recently worked with a writer on the Hello Bar side that is creating a style guide for us, a voice, tone, and brand. She's like, I'm just gonna, I kind of told her what we wanted, and as we give feedback, she's gathering it, and she's realizing, getting more acquainted with what we like, how we like things to flow, and she's creating it for us. So that's another cool thing as well.
Awesome.
Not the company, you just got to give the main aspects of the brand and how the message are communicated. Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, guys. Well, it is 10 a.m. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Chad, for being here.
Thank
and
you
all
so
the wonderful
much.
and amazing content you gave. So many great resources, so many great tools. I'm sure you guys would agree. Make sure to send Chad some love in the chat box and apply to the training as well. And we'll be sending that out. We'll send all the resources, the slide deck, and the recording. Yay, you're very welcome.
Thanks.
Great webinar.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Okay, well, you guys have a wonderful day out there, and we will see you guys soon. Thanks, Carla. Thanks for being here.